Hey everyone, Spazzy Dragon here, aka Syndromes, and welcome back to Meet a Faction. That was one of one of the few projects that I had in Discover Freelancer, which obviously tapered off and kind of fucked off after a while, but here it is back. And today with me, I have this fuck. Say hello, Wesker, my boy.
What's up, guys?
So, how long until your next ban?
Uh, well, I just have to hold out until August, and then that's where I'm going to be departing for 3 months for real life. So hopefully I just get banned after that and not beforehand.
Good man. So, obviously, today we're going to be talking about the Red Hessian Army. Because, of course, we are. So, and, before actually we go and do that, tell us a bit more about yourself. And, like, who the fuck are you?
Hi, my name's Wesker. I joined the server a while ago. I pretty much like a lot of the community. Many of you know me, but I am more or less just like a snub PvPer, faction leader, and base sieger. I can't forget the big part of it right there. The guy who coordinated like the siege of like 3 core 5 POBs. So that sort of gave me the title, mixed with 1.5 million core 1 and 2 POBs that left Rhineland and the Omegas clean until my ban, that was.
It doesn't seem like it's going to stop
Yeah.
you, though.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
It was only for a stupid mistake that I've made. Well, like I didn't handle it like a cunt when I got banned. I don't think I did handle it like a cunt when I got banned anyways. I don't know what the admins thought when I made my little goodbye post. That wasn't really a goodbye, but I learned from it. It was a stupid mistake, and it's fixed now anyways, so I couldn't be stupid about it even if I wanted to again. So, but
Well,
aside from that,
that's time is gonna tell. So about the Red Hessian Army itself, in your specific case, like I wouldn't usually ask people this, but in your specific case, this is Mark II of the Red Hessian Army. Tell us a little bit about the first one. Did you inherit it, or did you?
I did in fact inherit the faction in its official state. It was towards the end of 2015, mid towards the end. The faction, the former leader, A-Realm, and several of the HT members had bailed completely from the faction in pursuit of real life or other video games or something else, and the faction was left in a, well, there's no other way to put it, it was left in a dead state. Several other leaders tried to inherit it after A-Realm, but none of them could really make it work. And then one day I was just sitting about, and some people were saying, like, the Red Hessian Army is going to die if they don't get a new leader. And I was like, I'll try it. And I met the guy who would get me in and help me out quite a bit, Zane Carrick, and we managed to do it. We managed to restart it, and we managed to make it into one of the most, I think, one of the most formidable factions in-game in terms of PvP. And a pretty consistent roleplay faction. That's what we've been gunning for anyways. At first, it was a bit of a struggle to maintain consistency because I was new to leading a faction. But as time went on, things definitely got better and smoothened out. We started to get a better image generally for most people. I mean, we got to the point where we could rally up like over 30 members in game. It was pretty fun.
So tell us a little bit about the NPC faction itself, especially to me, because I have never really had a Red Hessian character before. And actually, let me just open this up. Red Hessians. The Red Hessians are a numerous and well-organized criminal group, composing largely of unemployed miners operating out of the Rhineland space who attack civilian and commercial targets of opportunity. The Corsairs... These Hessians are fighting a bloody war with the Corsairs for domination in the Omega systems and Rhineland space, a war that has been already cost thousands of lives from both sides and is nowhere near ending.
So basically, in my own words, putting it up is basically way back when, so mind you, the Bunshu have already been around for quite a bit at this point. But the corporations basically in Rhineland, it's capitalism, so it's the wealthy are the ones with the most money are the ones with the most prestige, and the ones with the most prestige in any kind of society are obviously the ones with the most power. And so capitalism comes at the expense of the unwealthy or the poverty or the lower class, and a ton of those people were miners working out in Dresden because this is back when Dresden was abundant with minerals, and a bunch of people basically just said, fuck the corporations. We don't want to be involved with this at all. We're going to break off and we're going to fight against them. And in doing so, they got a ton of support because it was a large portion of Rhineland that was unemployed or being starved or made going broke pretty much. And they formed themselves and started what was the Popular Revolution, now more popularly known as the Volks Revolution. And the primary goal of them, above all else, many people, because you should listen to this part, because many people get the Red Hessians wrong in the sense that they want to overthrow the government over everything else. That's wrong. The Red Hessians overall want to get rid of the corporate influence in Rhineland, which is why you'll notice the army and several others, like I always prioritize the corporations over the federal assets and whatnot. It's the corporations that the Rhineland wants gone, because those are the ones that just, they put them out of business pretty much. They're the ones that have oppressed the Hessians the most.
Well, I mean, if you're willing to take up arms and go kill yourself against a more, well-armed, well-backed opponent, then it must be something big that happened.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Like it's the years of oppression, really. I mean, like you see it in real life. It's like a group of
we have examples.
miners.
We have examples.
Definitely.
All right. So here's an interesting question. Everything that you described is obviously a huge part of the roleplay element of it. But as we already know, what you can actually do in game and what you could do in game on a regular basis, in theory, is often very different. So what about your ID? Like, what do you do in game? Let's say I lock my Red Hessian in the character. What do I do?
So as a Red Hessian secondary member, the thing that I would do, and the thing that many would do, is pretty much what I said is piracy. Remember, the big part of what gets them funding and what gets their fear out and whatnot, and they rely on fear. The secondary fleet, more than anything else, relies on fear to bring in members as much as they do to make the corporations or install fear into the corporations. So basically, it's piracy, really. That's like the meat of their in-game potential is to pirate, because they have so many ships to do it with in general. And their big targets are obviously Omega 11, which is where Daumen, the biggest corporation in Rhineland, is abundant, and Omega 7, which is where Kruger is abundant. Those are the big choke points for piracy. And you've seen, if you've been around with the RHA prior to my ban, you know that when we started up, a big part of what we did was we got piracy raids. We got entire groups of people to basically just lock down Omega 7 and Omega 11, more so Omega 7 than anything else. So it's really piracy. The fighting against feds really comes in the event that you're attacked, or at least that's how it should go. But many people just use the ID in the ships because, I want to shoot Rhineland caps. Or at least that's when they wanted to.
Okay, so how difficult would you say your ID, as in your both, let's say, in this case you are actually representing the RHA as the NPC faction, and vice versa, right? So you are just the vanilla Red Hessians. So, for example, for a relatively new player in Discover Freelancer, how difficult would you describe the faction to be played as? In terms of both roleplay and as well as in-game
So are we
activities.
talking about the secondary fleet, or are we talking about the Red Hessian army itself? I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Well, I mean, if you just said that if you are basically one and the same, so I guess this particular question would apply to both.
To both?
Yeah.
So, in terms of difficulty to represent the NPC faction as RHA, I'm going to go ahead and say it's quite difficult right now in game, obviously, because we don't have the power over the NPC faction, the secondary fleet, which is the Red Hessians. The Red Hessian army, back when it used to, or when it was official, it was not difficult because we had the power over the Indies. But in order to represent the Red Hessians as the secondary fleet in game, it's not very difficult. I mean, the ID lines give it to you right there, piracy, and you are dead hostile to the corporations. And with those two lines and with the ships you have available to you, you have everything from a snub to a battleship. You can definitely make it happen. You can definitely go about pirating people. You have transports as well. It's not very difficult as a secondary player. As a primary player in our current state, the primary fleet being the Red Hessian army, it is difficult because the Red Hessian army, remember, they're the more formalized version, basically. We don't resort to just piracy. The formalized version is I'm going to use, what was a good example? You have the LN, you have
Yeah.
you have the primary fleet, which represents the secondary fleet. They follow in. The primary fleet in the Red Hessians' case, though, because we're basically trying to holster authority over unlawfuls, an NRP that's much more difficult than holstering authority over lawfuls, because obviously in the unlawful groups, it's like, it's much more of a struggle because they're unlawfuls. They're not the
Well,
they're
sure.
not the order following.
But what I meant by
organized.
the question initially is, what about the area itself? How easy it is for you or ID to survive, to find interaction, to find PvP?
Oh, okay,
and when it
okay.
comes to actual PvP, how dangerous are the groups that you encounter with? And what about your allies?
Yeah.
Do you have someone backing you up?
So, in terms of our ZOI for piracy and fulfilling our role, it is currently not very easy. It used to be very easy way back when choke points were actually choke points, and the commodities were more lucrative. When I say more lucrative, I mean like more impactful. You could sell uncut diamonds for much more. At one point, there used to be an old route where it was gold ore and uncut diamonds, and it was extremely profitable, and it was extremely easy to roleplay the Hessians because everybody was trying to get it. You could just pirate the traders coming in, which mostly were Dowman and Kruger. As far as fighting our enemies, how dangerous has it been? I think at first it was quite dangerous because the faction was still growing. It was just sort of coming out of its hold. And we were up against what are some pretty solid rival factions. Rhineland Military has a history of being a very solid PvP faction, as do the TBH, more or less, probably not PvP or the indie player base, but the vessels we're fighting against, the Titans, Centurions, and whatnot, and other Corsair vessels are nothing short of better, really. There's no other way to put it, the Titan and Centurion in particular, so it makes fighting on fighters extremely difficult. They obviously have more numbers and whatnot, both NRP and likely ORP, at least they did back then. But over the years to now, it's gotten much easier to sort of become like the impactful, dangerous, unlawful group we are, because we've really made a statement. We've really like made our presence known. So currently, I would say it's more difficult to pirate because there's not as much to pirate, but it is certainly easy to make an impactful statement in PvP in-game.
Let's quickly touch up on the subject of ships. So, the Red Hessians are one of the rare factions in Discovery Freelancer who have a complete ship line, more or less. What can you say in like a couple of words for every single ship that you have?
So the Loki is piss, don't fly it. As a PvPer, and many of you know me as being a really, really fucking good snub PvPer, which I'd like to be confident and say I am, do not touch the Loki. It is terrible. It is a heavy fighter that is bigger than the Odin, and it has, only 4 gun slots, and we all know how any fighter with less than 6 gun slots that's not a light fighter works on the server. It doesn't work at all. So the Loki is definitely not your ship at all. The Odin, on the other hand, is amazing. The Odin is my personal favorite ship. It's the one Spazzy's flying right now. It has received a slight turn rate nerf recently, but that was definitely not uncalled for, I'll say. I'm not entirely against it. It's still an amazing ship. It's an amazing group fighter. It's got amazing gun arcs. It's got a really solid power core, and obviously its shape. It's the third.
It also has a Red Hessian
volume
thruster, which is hands down the most fucking beautiful thruster in the game right now.
Absolutely awesome. And by volume, it is the 3rd smallest ship in the game, so you will definitely... It is a good ship for a beginning player in a group fight. As a duelist, though, with its turn rate nerf, it's become a bit less powerful, but it's still definitely manageable. Those of you that watch my PvP videos will know for certain that that's true. Now moving on to our cap line, that's definitively Red Hessian. We have access to the Border Worlds line as well, but I'll just stick to the Red Hessian, or the Asgard line for now. The Hell is a precursor to the Vidar, which is our heavier cruiser. The Hell is more or less a Desi. I think it's just a cruiser by definition, but it's a lighter cruiser. It's definitely usable. It's got 3 heavy slots as far as I'm concerned, and it's good for pretty much anything, like piracy. It is a pirate cruiser, and I mean in piracy it's definitely usable. It's smaller than the Vidar, less tanky, more maneuverable, I think, and I would recommend it to anyone. It's employed by many people. You have the Vidar, which is a heavy tanking cruiser. It's got 4 heavy slots, and if you roll with a bunch of Cerberus turrets or a missile and Cerberus turrets in primary, that ship has armor that is not matched by any other cruiser in the game except for maybe the Corsair Prefect. I think it got an armor buff. I'm not sure. But it's definitely good for tanking. It's got solid maneuverability, and considering how big, heavy, and tanky it is, it's actually got a flat pancake-like sort of shape, so it's usable. It's like a baby Star Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would definitely recommend that if you're going to go ahead and fight against other cruisers or even battleships, as long as you just keep distance, and that can be said with any cruiser pretty much. Then you have I forgot the gunboat. The Heimdall is now, it used to be terrible, but now currently it is one of the most amazing ships in the game. Amazing gunboats. It's got solid maneuverability, solid armor, and it's got pretty much solid arcs, I think.
I'm still trying to find one. Guns. Kind of hoping that someone's going to sell one.
Oh, it's very good. Many people love to fly it around. It's very fun to fly around. It's a really good looking ship too. I think it looks really cool for a gunboat. I think that's like the best looking ship in our entire ship line.
The Hessian line is in general just visually appealing.
It's really nice. The Heimdall is an amazing gunboat. I would recommend it to absolutely anybody. Really good gunboat. And then finally, the infamous, the thing that has been around everywhere and is responsible for the destruction of millions of POBs and the destruction of millions of Rhineland and Corsair fleets is the infamous Jormungand. The Jormungand has, sort of been nerfed, not directly, but indirectly as a result of weapon changes. The Cerberus nerf after 4.87 definitely hit the ship hard. It's got a blocky shape. And despite its unique arcs, it's got very unique arcs and very unique gun placements. It's very outfitted for being shot from behind, as weird as that sounds, because it's got 2 heavy turrets that directly face behind and only 1 that faces forward. And all 3 can fire broadside, which means it's amazing for base sieges. And as in general, I think it is currently still the second tankiest medium battleship in the mod. And it's definitely usable, but it's really only usable in group fights, in groups, I would say. That kind of, in group fights, obviously a group fight, there's many people there, but you need to have, a fleet of Jorms if you're going to be effective. 1 or 2 Jorms won't cut it because of how big and blocky it is, and it's very easy to hit, especially with the recent gun updates. You know, heavy mortars and primary turrets obviously rule over close-range Cerberus turrets now, so with that in mind, it is at a disadvantage in comparison to other medium battleships and even dreadnoughts, but it's still definitely in groups. It's got its nifty forward gun, and that makes it very fun to use, so you can pretty much rule out using a mortar. You can just use a missile. You got these nice new Nightmare torpedoes, and it's very fun to just mount one on the back top of it and just watch it fly over the ship and hit something, so there's that. But Jormungand, okay. Vidar, really good. Hell, good. Heimdall, amazing. Probably the best thing we have right now. Odin, amazing in group fights. Difficult to use in duels, but usable. Loki, do not touch it. It's the worst thing in our ship line right now.
Okay, so heading back to the idea of what you can do in game, let's say we have 3 types of player overall. You have the people who are focused more on PvP. There's people who are focused a little bit more on the roleplay side, and then there's people who want to make money, for example. So which of these 3 people, what are you inviting them to do in the RHA?
So, as if I were inviting all 3, what would I tell them to do?
What place do they have in your faction?
So, I'll start off with the mining group. So, we've been in a big struggle to get a mining bonus recently. The development and admin team has basically fucked us off many times. Shut us off. About getting a mining bonus. But recently, though, against all odds, we have gotten a 3.0 bonus on uncut diamonds, despite the fact that that's just going to be going away soon, and we can make the most of it. So mining and players who love to do mining and transporting can definitely engage in that. There's also blood diamond distribution, which is semi-profitable. We do have access to some nifty transports, and we are friends with the IMG in roleplay as long as we're just doing it undercover, and there are several other cover routes we can do, so you can definitely have fun with IMG, assuming they come back and do transport convoys again. You can have fun with them.
Shout out to Jack Henderson.
Shout out to Jack Henderson. Get back here, man. But definitely the mining of uncut diamonds and the transporting, that is a big thing now that we have a mining bonus. I've been pushing for that for eons, not just because I think it fits our lore, given we have a background of being miners.
Yeah, out of all the factions, like all of the unlawful factions who have been asking for these fucking things, I think the Red Hessians actually doesn't make
the Red
sense.
Hessians and the Mollies, in my opinion, are the ones I need.
Yeah, Xenos as well.
With the big Xenos too. But yeah, with those mining bonuses now in place, you can definitely mine, have fun, and, well, you know, transport. But there's definitely that to do now. Luckily, we have it, and we can do it. It's semi-profitable, and we have recently, the RHA has been role-playing with other factions to get open sell points for them. And as well, there is also a new trading commodity that we can transport to the Blood Dragons that we have recently made a deal with in RP. The comm link is somewhere in the comms channel if you look for from Red Hessian Army to BD, but we can transport them arms, and it's very profitable. Yeah.
So,
and, oh yeah. You want me to move on to the PvPers? But
Yeah.
that's basically, that's pretty much...
Oh, sorry. I did something just now. Moment. Hello? You cut off. Moment. My friends, we are having a...
Alright.
Hey, look, he's back. Okay. Stop!
And sending you a trade request
sending
again.
me...
I did that one on purpose.
You're a fuck. Okay, so... PvPers.
PvPers joining the faction. What do they have available to them? Oh man, okay, so there is quite a bit for PvPers to do, obviously. We are at war with two factions, two big factions in particularly, or fighting them currently. And those two groups that we are actively pursuing offensives against, keyword here, offensives, are the Unioners and the Corsairs. The Unioners because they're a terrorist organization to Rhineland, and we're targeting them in particular because, you know, fighting them, yeah, it works to our advantage in terms of drawing in support, and the Unioners are not within the fold right now, and they are currently working with the Corsairs, and it is now public knowledge to pretty much everybody who lives in Rhineland and Sirius. The second, with that in mind, most obvious group that we're always going to be in offensives with, likely, is the Corsairs. And the feud against the Corsairs has been going on since our appearance in the Omegas, and it's most prominently in Omega 5. Should we fly over to Omega 5 to see?
Sure.
It is also prominently in this system. The Corsair base is back behind that purple planet over there. You can't see it. It used to be under the control of the Hessians way back when. But the Hessians have now gained an upper hand in the system. We have control of Planet Tangier here, finally, and we have our nice, nifty Viernheim station, and then we have Battleship Castle in the cloud over there. This is a system that we're really focusing on in the Omegas right now, on maintaining a stronghold in, because this is also the homeland of something else that PvPers that I purposely look for PvPers to join, called the SOA. The SOA is the Red Hessian Army's special forces group. They operate against nomads and whatnot in the Omegas, and there is a specific separate set of rules of engagement for the SOA. And like I said, they operate primarily out of here. There's a lot of cool roleplay opportunities with the SOA. You get to venture out of your ZOI and do recon. And there is even a division of the SOA that works as the General Major's Guard, the General Major being the character right in front of you. And there is that. And then on top of that, you definitely, as a PvPer, if you don't want to be an SOA, you have plenty of shit to do as a primary member. Like I said, fighting the Unioners in Rhineland and fighting the Corsairs. That is a big job of any PvPer. When events happen, the first people I look to, obviously, are the PvPers in the faction, not because I don't like my other players, but because they're the ones that are going to be effective in fights. And that pretty much sums up what you can do as a PvPer, and to all my faction members watching this, I still highly encourage you to get involved in SOA. We do need more SOA members into the community. If you are a talented PvPer and you want to do something aside from mining and just like strictly doing nothing but typing up stories, the SOA is definitely a thing for you. There is definitely some roleplay stuff mandatory and involved in it, but I definitely look for PvPers apart for SOA because they're held to a higher standard as the Red Hessian Army's Special Forces. Thanks for slow docking.
Fuck you. So speaking of the roleplay players, so for example, a player joins in who's not good at PvP, he can't be better at PvP, he wants to do roleplay. What can you let him do?
So, as a role player, I definitely look for a big example of a person who is involved in roleplay and is not the A-grade PvPer. And I don't mean to stab at him. He's probably going to get upset when he sees this video. Is Zane. But Zane currently holsters a very big and very, very important roleplay position. His character is currently the General Major's right-hand man, and he is the SOA director. There are several
AK fuck buddy.
Yes. There are several roles for you as a role player. In HC, I do not just look for PvP performance. I look for knowledge of the lore and knowledge of roleplay consistency in general. That is a big aspect of what will get you into HC. More so than PvP. I can name a million PvPers in the faction who are great, but not all of them are explicitly knowledgeable of what happens and what goes on within the faction's lore. So that is definitely a role. HC, and as an HC member, you holster... So as a major, you holster control of several fleets, and those are assigned to you by the general major. And as a brigade general, you get an entire system to represent as yourself. So currently,
you're actually allowing them to do personal projects, not just...
personal projects within the system. So I'm going to give you an example. The Moff Tarkin of RHA right now is Gagada's character, which is Leif McWard, who is the brigade general of this very system. And his character calls the shots on what happens in this system. Because obviously a big mistake that I see, and I don't mean to call other faction leaders or other faction lead characters and say they're bad, is that they try to holster control over every system in their respective faction. And no one person, realistically speaking, can do that. There is just, I just don't see how that's possible. You would have to have so much, you would have no time to be an actual character. You would be doing nothing 24/7 but just sitting down and looking at fleet positions. So obviously the General Major, one of her weaknesses is that she's not a explicitly amazing capital ship, general. She's not a field general, more or less. She's more or less a fighter pilot and just a skilled diplomat and an aggressive leader, which is what puts her in a position. And she has a big, loving heart for many people of the Volks Revolution. And so she relies on the brigade generals to make the shots and call the shots in several of the systems. So a big system right here is Omega 5. This is like the forefront of our conflict against the Corsairs. And we have a brigade general in charge of that. We, in light of the recent Omega 11 event I made, which you should all totally participate in the way, it's going to be awesome if the admins get in on it, used to be run by Shiki's character, who is the brigade general of that system. There is currently a brigade general as well for Omega 7, given there is a big amount of piracy and big amount of interactions and in-game stuff that happens there, and that's headed by Wasser's character. And then finally, the SOA director has total authorization and legitimacy and authority over operations against the nomads and shit that goes on in Omega 47, because that's the SOA's area for their clique area, whatever you want to call it. That's where they hang out the most.
Clubhouse.
So there is a ton of things. You actually, as a role player, you have potential for more power over what happens in the faction than you do as a PvPer, more or less. That's not to say that the PvPers can't get involved, but I do definitely look for people who are knowledgeable of the lore, people who know how to write, people who know how to handle comms correctly, how to be diplomats, how to roleplay commanding fleets and whatnot.
Basically.
Oh yeah, how to not fuck things up. I definitely look for those people. You are not excluded from the faction. I welcome those people to be in HC, and make no mistake, we are in need of HC members. There are several factions, and even if we do run out of systems to represent, there are a million other jobs I have for brigade generals. So don't feel like you're excluded if you're a role player and you're not talented at PvP. There is 150% a position for you. There is a position for everybody. And with that in mind, yeah, that sums it up.
So you actually said, you are looking for people to actually use those roleplay assets. Tell us about the assets themselves. What is it that you're trying to do in short term and long term, and do you have all of the tools that you need for it?
So, as far as asset representation goes and what we're trying to do currently, we are not stupid idiots that are role-playing as the almighty Hessian fleet that has never fallen and broken. Part of what makes the spice in any kind of character story, or in this case, faction, is
the denial of the
denial of weakness, and that's a big flaw. And we are not denying our weaknesses. We are role-playing the ban or my ban as a big downfall in RHA. A big loss of power, a big loss of authority over the people of the Volks Revolution, which obviously is the meat of their support. And So what we're actually trying to do right now, contrary to popular belief of like us going around and sieging everywhere, is we are ceasing offensives against federal assets in Rhineland, because we obviously cannot take on the federal government head-on with our current numbers and our weakened state. And we are playing defensively. We are not going on offensives too hefty in the Omegas, maybe like a few big offensives, just a few, but not anything serious. We are not pushing in Rhineland again, like I said, and a big part of what I'm trying to do with our assets, which brings me to that part, is get our assets to represent us in a defensive manner. A big thing that I've been pushing for in a big roleplay project that has been met with disapproval from the development team for God knows what reason is we are pushing for a representation of one of our Jormungands in Omega 55. As everybody must know at this point, Omega 11 is going supernova given its sun state.
Let's go there,
and
by
what
the way.
we've been... Huh?
Let's go there.
Let's go to Omega 11. That is a pretty system. The fastest way to get back there is through 47s. Let's go this way. So, Omega 11, as you all know, is pretty much on the verge of destruction. It's written in the lore for the event I made, and it should be pretty much, if you know anything about Red Giants, it should be public knowledge to everybody by now. And it's knowledgeable to other factions. So obviously, we can't just leave all our assets there, because we have to make everything count, especially in our weakened state right now. We need to make every asset count, and we are evacuating every asset from Fradel. And what we're doing is we're evacuating them through Omega 55 to Leipzig Station, or directly to Leipzig Station. Like parts of them will go the mining assets, because we're assuming for the sake of roleplay that they're out in the mining fields, obviously, and that would put them closer to the Omega 55 entrance. So we're trying to roleplay the mining assets as cutting through Omega 55 and heading to Dresden, which is where they would end up near Leipzig, and our direct military assets and people near Fradel will go from Fradel to Dresden, and they'll be right there next to Leipzig. So Leipzig's going to be hosting quite a bit of our population, our military assets soon. It's going to be a big point in our defense. But what we're trying to do as a means of safeguarding our defense in Dresden is get a Jormungand asset represented in Omega 55. So here's where the tricky part comes in. Mind you, we have, according to the development team, we have 12 Jormungands as represented. The Corsairs and Outcasts obviously have plenty more. Mm-hmm. And a big problem with our faction is that we're not actually able to get all of them represented. And the reason for that has been a very not clear and not reasonable one whatsoever, if I'm going to go ahead and dare say it. It's basically me being told, no, I can't represent it. And it's kind of a shame, because a lot of our roleplay has been centered around it. It took us, 3 years of roleplay to get that pretty little planet right there. That I can see as being a bit more justified for some time taking, because it's a planet, obviously. But getting one of, our fleet assets represented, when we only have one other fleet asset, which is represented right here in the system, where there's already 2 bases, is it just seems kind of silly to me. So that's a big issue. And with that in mind, I wouldn't push for a Jorm anywhere else. Jorm assets were offered to me in some very not consistent places whatsoever, I'll say. And I just don't understand why the roleplay we've been pushing for has ended with us not getting what we need. But roleplay we haven't been doing has just sort of gotten us to the point where we're getting Jorms offered in other systems. It's kind of like a messy situation. It's messy for me to say it like this, because I can't disclose everything. But it's really silly there. But that is a big problem with our asset representation. But to sum it up, we are playing defensively in terms of fighting against the Feds. We are taking minor offensives against the Unioners and the Corsairs. And we're just trying to get that asset represented to signify our sort of defensive position. Because the rest of our systems, remember, we're not entirely defended by our military assets. A big part of why the Red Hessians and the Red Hessian army has survived is the environment of the Omegas, and this cloud is one of those things. The clouds and asteroid fields are basically a huge, huge, huge safeguard for the Red Hessians, and it's the reason they've been able to survive since the beginning of their time. Voklan, you'll notice, is in an asteroid, or in a gas cloud. Yeah. This is in a gas cloud. Castle's in a gas cloud. It covers its, it masks its position pretty much.
And considering they're basically miners, then, they know how to survive and thrive.
They know how to survive in these environments too. The secondary fleet definitely. we've sort of moved up from the miners thing as far as the primary fleet goes, but the secondary fleet definitely, that's like a big portion of how they survive, because obviously the secondary.
This system is.
So we're entering Omega 11, and as you can see, this is, this place is gonna blow soon.
Hey, join the Red Hessian army so you can actually fly here.
Yep. We are having a huge event here, guys. It is in this very pretty and awesome system, and I am inviting literally everybody with almost pretty much besides NEMPS in the event that we don't get admin sponsorship. There is going to be no restrictions on what you can fly, what loadouts you can bring, what equipment you can use. Bring everything you want, because many of us don't like the fact that we can't bring everything we want and do everything we want in an event for the sake of balance. And while I understand balance and fair play is an important thing, I think we all need a few events where we can just sort of cut loose and just use all the cool tools we have been given. So this is definitely one of those events where you can bring anything and have fun. And if you want to have one, this is probably going to be the last big fight we have in the system, unless the devs pull a prank on me and sponsor an event themselves here, which I don't know will happen because I'm not there, but for certain that's that. So as we're moving around this inner sort of asteroid field, as everybody knows is the mining field, and we're about to pass by the Omega 55 jump hole in this little asteroid pocket right here, and that's where we're signifying the mining vessels is going, because the mining field is further left. So they'll be evacuating to 47 and 55, and then Dresden is up here, and that's right next to Fradel, and so that's where our military assets are going to take the route, obviously, or go, because it'll be quicker for them. So let's go to Omega 55 for a second, so I can specify about why we need a Jormungand asset.
We're actually going to run out of time before that.
Are we?
Considering we're here and this is a beautiful fucking system, in short, for example, for all the players who are currently watching, they're considering joining the Red Hessian army. What would you like to tell to these people? Words of wisdom. To sway them.
So the first thing I would recommend you do is the Red Hessian army, as much as it is at an ORP level, it involves everybody. I am not an elitist. I am open to helping new players that are just joining and whatnot. But you do have to know just a little bit, pretty much. You have to prove that you're semi-experienced. If you're right off the bat joining onto the server and you're looking to join the faction, you should probably take a few minutes to just roleplay a Hessian in general and get the gist of it. But for those of you that are semi-experienced and you're newer and you're not as good at PvP per se or just roleplay, I am willing to work with those people, because the issue with many factions that rule out those players is that they eventually lose in number count, and they're not willing to put in the effort to help other people. And so that's a big part of what's made us have so many people both in the past and currently, is the fact that we're willing to work with all kinds of people. And I do disregard any kind of faction you're in, because I know there are definitely big, ORP grievances specifically based on what factions you're part of. There are several members of Corsair factions that are in RHA. There are members of Order or Core that are in the faction together, basically here. And we do set aside all those sort of grievances and whatnot. So you definitely don't worry about what kind of, as long as you're not hell-bent and or not hell-bent, but giving a very bad impression to unless you're on the brink of being banned and you're acting up and whatnot. If you're causing drama and you're acting up in every sort of faction and just as a person in general, then obviously we're going to have to turn you down and you're going to have to work on your appearance. But if you're just somebody who flies in a specific faction and that faction is hated on for whatever reason by another group, don't feel excluded from RHA, because you can still definitely join. And with that in mind, Jesus Christ, what else was I going to say? It just totally
yes. Welcome to my world.
Yeah, totally fucking.
This is what happens when you make videos.
Yeah, I mean, just wait, repeat the question again. So, you're a new player and you're looking to join the faction. There is definitely a ton of opportunities. RHA has a ton of plans laid out. Whether or not those plans all go according to plan is definitely an unknown, because with the way our faction is currently going about. What we have in mind for the faction as an official faction and what goes on in the story are two very different things, as per my experience from working with the development team. So there's that. But I mean, activity-wise, there is no place like you're gonna find a shitload of activity here when we do events and whatnot. And if you're looking to get better at PvP, definitely join this faction. I'm serious, because everybody knows me, and I am not like the worst teacher in the world. And a big part of what makes a PvPer a good PvPer is experience in group fights. And if you're experiencing terrible group fights all the time, you will definitely struggle to gain an upper hand and whatnot. We definitely struggled when we were losing, but when you're flying with us, you essentially have a lot of a safety net to fall back on, and that will help you to work on what skills you're trying to learn in group fights and whatnot. So in terms of PvP roleplay, and obviously in terms of a tradesman, you have like a ton of things you can definitely do. Aside from that, things you should probably know before you join is definitely know this character as he's looking at right here, because like I said, it's like a military sort of dictatorship, and like the words of your superiors definitely matter. These characters and the brigade general characters are definitely ones you should know, and then obviously just know the lore and whatnot. Read up on it before you do, and then reading up on the SOA lore would probably help you as well if you're an experienced player. I would not recommend SOA to anybody, regardless of if you're a good PvPer or not. You do have to meet some kind of roleplay requirements, and that is knowledge of the lore in general, and just not being, like Spazzy said earlier, not being a shitter. And I definitely take note of that. So if you're interested in RHA, I look for more experienced players, both in like roleplay, but I definitely like put apart, separate them from the PvPers. If you're an experienced role player and you're a very good PvPer, you definitely have an upper hand at getting into SOA, just as long as you know the stuff. And with that in mind, hopefully not everything I said sounded like just spewing gibberish. And
at this point, I'm really hoping that I actually enabled the external capture and that you're actually heard. Okay, guys, this was Beat the Faction, coming back from the dead. If you're interested in this sort of thing, I'm going to have a thread open for it. And until then, I will see you later.
Attend the Omega 11 event!
You fox!